My girlfriend and I have been together 3 years. I am going to call her Nikki. I made a harmless remark on one of her Instagram stories, which sparked a conversation. After a week, we finally met in person after I got her phone number and then her Snapchat. We started spending time together in January, shortly after the holidays, and Valentine's Day was quickly approaching. To avoid the fear of being alone on that unpleasant vacation, it was a pleasure to start chatting with a girl at that time. However, Nikki told me about a stalker situation she was dealing with as Valentine's Day approached, and we had gone on a few dates. Ben is a man who went to the same commuter college as Nikki and is a few years older than her. She followed her around campus a couple of times after meeting him in class for a group project. She never did anything shocking or involving the police. She ignored the strange texts she received after discovering that this guy knew where she lived. She claimed that the reason she did not block the number was wished to test his ability to continue without the hints. I asked her why she was bringing this to my attention at this time, and she explained that it was because he started contacting her again, particularly around Valentine's Day, as you can see below. He also increased the frequency of his texts as the holiday approached. He went one step further and left a box of Russell Stover chocolates on her porch, but she chose to ignore it and let the texts pile up. He texted her, "I hope you like it," so she knew it was from him. "I left you this gift because," she ended it and responded with a lengthy note, which I won't post because I value her privacy. In it, she claimed that he needed assistance and that she was dating someone else, so she should be alone. She was afraid he would one day follow her home, despite the fact that there are numerous ways to locate someone's address these days. I tried my hardest to convey to her that I would not allow him to harm her in any way. After a few days, Nikki emailed me a screenshot that concerned me. Was a screenshot of a text message from a fictitious number asking if the man she was seeing was me. He wrote my name, so I felt included, which made me a little nervous. All I've heard so far about this guy is that he was a creepy and persistent texter who may have followed the girl I'm seeing home. Nikki was about to call the cops because he was texting her on fake numbers and bringing up my name. If this didn't stop, I told her I was going to the "If you try to contact her again, you will find yourself on Valentine's Day." This year, it occurred on a Friday. Nikki and I went to a wonderful restaurant on the water to eat. Because of the nice weather, we sat at an outdoor table. While eating, we both noticed a man sitting on a bench near the parking lot outside the dining area. He wore a hat down over his face, as if he were hiding. Nikki joked, "Could it be Ben?" We chuckled, but when we looked, he cocked his head slightly towards us. He looked at him, then averted his gaze before standing up and leaving a few seconds later. After a few minutes, the conversation shifted, and we enjoyed the rest of our time there. We were no longer laughing, and we were even wondering if it was really him. After all, it was Valentine's Day, and we wanted to spend it together, but her parents were home. We went back to my rental home together because I had the place to myself. As we sat on the couch, things began to get more personal. "What was that?" he asked, moving away from me. I also overheard it. "Something in the backyard from the outside. Would you like me to go check?" I inquired. She made a head nod. When I stepped out onto the backyard patio, I expected to hear some animals fleeing in fear of my presence. After slipping on my slides and searching the garden for anything that had fallen, I discovered the source of the noise. All of the beach chairs that were leaning against the house had toppled. I am not sure how anyone or something could accomplish it. There wasn't even a breeze that night. I looked around at the shrubs that surrounded our yard, and then, as if my mind could sense something strange right away, I focused on a tall bush. I literally tried to focus and get a better look at what I was looking at, which caused my neck to move forward. I took a few steps forward. When I realized it was someone standing in the bushes, I had an epiphany. He could tell I was paying attention to him. "Who is that?" I inquired. The man got going quickly. He darted out of the bushes so quickly that I thought he was going to charge at me. I took advantage of the opportunity to get him down while he was still fumbling with the shrubs and twigs, yelling at him repeatedly to stay down. When Nikki walked outside, I called the cops after shouting her name and saying, "Call the cops." The man on the ground struggled and tried to break free several times, but I had him firmly in my grip. While I was speaking with the police, I asked her if this was the man, and she gasped. He had already been arrested, so Nikki showed the officers all of the obsessive and harassing messages she had received from him. Oh my God, yes, it was the Ben guy who had been harassing her. What's worse is that at that moment, I realized he was wearing the same colored shirt that guy with the cap from earlier at the restaurant was wearing. The police arrived at the house and arrested him for trespassing and taking advantage of the situation. Nikki filed charges of stalking and harassment against the man. Ben was the ultimate creep. Thank goodness he was at least half as smart as to not contact her again, but this happened. 4 years ago, Valentine's Day was approaching, and my boyfriend and I had planned a romantic dinner, as most couples do. As we approached the restaurant, I noticed a couple outside staring strangely at my boyfriend and me. Nikki has an order of protection against him and will be arrested if he contacts her again. The host informed us that there would be a 45-minute wait and that she would text us once our table was ready. My boyfriend said, "Let's go to the mini golf across the street," and we were walking back to his car when the woman in the couple stood up and introduced herself as Mrs. Greddy. I thought it was strange and looked at my boyfriend, but she kept holding out her hand. I didn't mean to be impolite, so I shook her hand, and she continued to explain. Red flags go up, and my boyfriend politely declines, explaining that we have things to do. As we got into the car, she smiled and sat next to the husband, giving one of the most haunting looks I'd ever seen. She goes on to say that she doesn't have a card with her, but that she and her husband think we're a great-looking couple, that they're photographers, and that we'd make great photos, and that she should follow them to the studio because she thinks the wait will be long. The situation is off, but I'm still creeped out because this place isn't very big. The front door is visible from all levels, so as we reach the 5th round, I hear the entrance bell ring. I turn to look, and my heart sinks. It's the same lady and her husband. She appears to look around, and when we make eye contact, she gives me the creepiest smile. I tell my boyfriend how creepy that interaction was, and how the husband said nothing when we entered the mini golf facility. We laugh. I tell my boyfriend that I'm uncomfortable and that we should just go wait in the car because it has only been 15 minutes and won't be much longer. He agrees, and when we turn around, they're right behind us, smiling big and saying, "Crazy how we both came to this spot," said Mrs. Greddy. This time, the husband suggests we face each other, Greddy versus Rod. My boyfriend's heart sinks in that moment because his surname is Rods. We politely decline and do not want to. I told my boyfriend that we should call it a night and return to his place because it was closer than mine and my parents wouldn't be home until Sunday morning. He said we'd go after dinner and not let some weird couple ruin our night. We waited in his car for about 15 minutes, discussing how strange the situation was, until he received a text from the restaurant indicating that they were ready for us. As we hurried out, both of their smiles vanished. We have dinner, and he insists that I pay today because it is Valentine's Day. He goes to the loo, and while I wait, I think I see that woman peeking out from behind a corner, but I tell myself it was just my imagination. My boyfriend gets out and is ready to go, and we begin driving to his house, which is down a long road with trees on either side. I inform my husband that there is a car behind us as we enter a CVS parking lot. I needed to use the loo, and since we were going for a drive, we both got out and went. When we get out, we don't see the car that could be following us, so we go to his house. You remember that road I mentioned earlier, surrounded by trees? We were about 3 or 5 minutes into it when we heard a loud pop, and my boyfriend pulled over because his 2 front tires had popped. After determining what was going on, he dashed to the car and yelled, "Get out, there's not much more time before they get here." At this point, he cut the engine and turned off the lights. We were hiding behind trees and bushes when he called the cops and quickly explained where we were and what was going on. The operator told him to stay on the line, and the cops would be there in a few minutes. He said he couldn't stay on the phone and hung up. We were lying down when we heard a car engine start, and my boyfriend instructed me to lie flat while he locked the door. I was terrified and confused, unsure what was going on. We stayed down until the police arrived, which took about 2 minutes. We explained the situation and were told that we would be contacted if anything came up. I called my sister to come get us, and he called a tow truck for his car. 4 years later, nothing has come up, and we still don't know what they wanted or who they were. We heard the car's engine stop and the familiar voice of Mrs. Greddy, assuming that was her real name. During the autumn 2018 semester, I was taking some online classes through a fairly prestigious college, but I knew I would be returning to my hometown for the winter semester to attend university. Nonetheless, I wanted to make some new friends so that I wouldn't feel lonely, and perhaps along the way I'd meet someone to date, which is what happened. I met this girl on Tinder, and we had a lot in common. Now that we were married, we had a wild story to tell our music children. We were dating and had a wonderful time together. She wasn't from my hometown, and I noticed she'd changed since returning from Thanksgiving break. She was always sarcastic, but now she appeared mean. For example, her playful teasing had turned much more aggressive. There was no physical harm, just inappropriate teasing in a relationship, which I dismissed as stress due to upcoming finals. She eventually went back home for the winter. I moved into a flat when the winter semester began because the dorms didn't seem like much fun, and I had found something nice that was surprisingly inexpensive. We decided to break up on the night of the first day of class. As I mentioned, she was from a different state, and she was having a lot of trouble being away from home because she missed her family, friends, and pets very much, aside from me and her flatmate The dumping, which causes me too much stress and anxiety, lasted a few weeks, and each day I felt a little less depressed because, looking back on the relationship, I had a lot of problems. She didn't get along with anyone in town. She was a shy person, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but as I mentioned, she didn't have many friends to hang out with, so she preferred to be alone all the time. I decided that for that week, I would reactivate my Tinder account to see if I could get a match and possibly hang out with someone on the holiday so I wouldn't be alone because most of my friends already had boyfriends and girlfriends. I did this about 2 days before the holiday, and within a few hours of using the app, I had some matches. I was a little sad because I had planned some fun surprises for my girlfriend. When I asked about their Valentine's Day plans, I wasn't surprised to hear that they were all going to bars. I don't particularly enjoy that lifestyle, but I always use it as a last resort, and I wasn't in such a desperate situation at the time. I eventually began texting a girl named Alex, who did not share my interests. She preferred to stay at home and watch films, which I would also prefer to do. She even had the same major as one of my best friends and was taking some of the same classes with him. Alex was best described as having shoulder-length blonde hair, cute glasses, freckles, and bright blue eyes. After about an hour of texting, I got her Snapchat, and we continued the conversation there. I asked if she wanted to hang out on Valentine's Day, and she said yes, so it was Valentine's Day 2018, which was on Thursday of the week. Fortunately, I didn't have any Friday classes, and Alex promised she would. She asked if she could stay the night because it was snowing and her place was about 10 minutes away by foot, so of course I said yes, and we eventually fell asleep around 1 a.m. The first half of the night went relatively smoothly, with me getting some McDonald's, watching a movie, and then walking around downtown for a while before returning to my flat and having sex, which, to be honest, went very well. She skipped her Friday morning class so that we would not feel obligated. Around 3 a.m., Alex woke me up while she was getting out of bed, but I didn't tell her. The room was dark, but I could tell she was going to the bathroom, so she turned on the light and closed the door to keep the light from spilling into the bedroom. I was so exhausted that I just fell back asleep, but I awoke again at 5:30 a.m. I checked to see if Alex was still in the bathroom, but I couldn't see the outline of the light, so I assumed it was turned off. I wasn't shocked yet, I was just wondering where she was, so I sat up and grabbed my phone from my bedside table. I hadn't received any texts from her indicating that she had left, but the clothes she had been wearing earlier were still on the floor next to mine, indicating that she was still present somewhere. Then I heard a creak from the opposite side of the room. Alex was standing in the corner of the bedroom, his back to me, and I was terrified. I called out her name and asked if she was all right, but she didn't respond, so I turned on the lamp on the bedside table, which didn't produce much light but was adequate, and got out of bed to go to her. She was just standing there, not moving, and I wanted to see what was going on, so I placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and called her name again, but she did not respond. Response: after 10 seconds of silence, she turned around at an unnatural speed and began screaming like a crazy person while hitting me. It wasn't the harshest of blows, but it hurt a little because I'm a skinny guy, and the scariest part was that she had no emotion on her face. I backed up and collapsed onto my bed, and she followed, still screaming and hitting me. After about 30 seconds of this, she dashed to her clothes, grabbed them, and fled my flat. I jumped out of bed and dashed to my front door, which had been left open, and she was gone. I locked it and noticed that the bathroom smelt awful. When I opened the door, the awful stench poured out, and when I turned on the light, I discovered that the room was in disarray, with my medicine bag thrown on the floor, the shower curtain ripped off, and worst of all, she had smeared it on the mirror. I immediately called the police, and they dispatched an officer to my home. I only had one picture of her that she sent on Snapchat, which I screenshotted because it was cute, but it was with a Snapchat filter. Unfortunately, all the police could do was file a report and keep an eye out for her in the area. They suggested I invite a friend over later that night in case she tried to break in, which I did. They asked to see her Tinder and Snapchat profiles, but both had been deleted. Later that night, a guy with the same major as Alex came over, and I told him everything. She mentioned that she was in a relatively small class that only met twice a week, and when I showed Rob the photo, he said he had never seen her in class. Rob and I watched a movie before falling asleep around 12 a.m. When I awoke around 3 a.m., I noticed someone attempting to open the front door from the opposite side. It went on for a minute or two before stopping, and I went to check through the peephole, but no one was there. Nothing has happened since, but it still scares me.